Herman Mashaba, the mayor of Joburg, has vowed to fight corruption and to grow the economy of the city by 5% in the next 5 years. The mayor faced a motion of no confidence recently and survived it. The city has compiled a report that claims losses of up to 16 billion rands to corruption. Mr. Herman Mashaba has been in office for 15 months and he's here to tell us about the experience and his future plans. To discuss the challenges and successes that the new DA government in Joburg has achieved, we are joined by the mayor of Joburg, Mr. Herman Mashaba. Well, he's relatively new in the job, but it's over a year now, so he's a veteran at this task of running a city. Mr. Herman Mashaba, good evening to you and welcome.
Good evening, and thank you very much for getting this great opportunity to engage.
Yeah, it's end of the year. It's been a long, arduous year, I'm sure, for you, right? Going around, traveling, meeting the stakeholders on one hand and listening to their issues and trying to resolve them. On the other hand, trying to transform the government and implement your programs. What has the journey been like so far?
Well, I think as expected, it was not an easy one, and it's not going to be an easy one for the next 5-10 years for the city of Johannesburg, because the city is sitting with massive challenges that our residents are aware of in terms of housing, unemployment. 1 in 3 of our residents unemployed, sitting with 170 billion rands of infrastructure backlog, inheriting a dysfunctional political management system, but we're lucky that we've really survived, because as you're aware, Tim and the listeners, that the kind of political arrangement that our people voted for on the 3rd of August 2016, it's not an easy one. But I think for me, it's a kind of system I appreciate, because it does not allow me or anybody else to abuse civil society, because for the last 20 years, our people were abused. We were abused prior to 1994 by the apartheid, the National Party government. But on the 27th of April 1994, we voted for new democracy. We were a free nation. And Mandela gave us that freedom, made us a proud people. But after his tenure, things started to collapse, and unfortunately, they had to be stopped by the 3rd of August in the 3 metros. It's a new journey. Our people have voted for change, and I've been given that responsibility, but responsibility in a coalition arrangement. Coalition arrangement with us is a DA with 38%, other smaller parties with the EFF giving us the support, not in a formal arrangement, voting with us on an issue-by-issue basis. It's a kind of an arrangement that, Tim and the listeners, your survival and the survival of Johannesburg is dependent on negotiations and engagements, which is good, but on the other hand, it brings its own challenges.
When you got into the system, and as I said new, but relatively new because it's over a year that you've been in charge, what did you find? What are the residents complaining about the most? What is their biggest pain point?
Well, the number one problem, I think we do studies all the time. I mean, the number one thing, and you think it's an obvious thing, but it's a fact, it's a high levels of unemployment in our city, followed by the drug and alcohol abuse, because because of high unemployment, it then leads to alcohol and drug abuse, which unfortunately in the process leads to our families' destruction. Thirdly, housing. Housing is a huge challenge in the city of Johannesburg. We have the biggest housing list. I mean, I'm sitting with over 300,000 housing backlog. And the biggest the casualties of this mismanagement and lack of provision of housing for our people are the missing middle. People who are low-income earners, people earning from, what, 3,500 up to 15,000, 20,000. These are the people who have always regarded them that for the last 20 years they were the forgotten people. Because obviously I think the new government, ANC, when they took power in 1994, went on this massive RDP housing, the building of our people. But people who are ignored are the working class, low-income earners. We found, obviously, for building RDP houses where this missing metal did not qualify. And also at the same time, they do not qualify to get normal bonds and mortgage from the banks. So that is why we see we're sitting with this massive
so you have people
informal settlements. We see our young professional people who are not earning good monies living in backyard rooms in in Soweto and other informal settlements. So it's a huge challenge. That is why when I took over, I made a commitment that I'm going to take back the city, turn it into a construction site to build affordable accommodation for this missing metal.
And of course, I suppose these are people who are employed, but earn low incomes and then are excluded from housing.
Absolutely, that's a tragedy, because you look at how this city has developed over the last 20 years, the sentence and the Rosebanks of this world, but it is obviously for high earners. Because if you're earning 10,000 rands a month, team, you can't afford to live in Sandton or Rosebank.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, you deserve also to really get accommodation.
When you campaigned to become mayor, you did say that you want to reclaim the inner city. How are you progressing so far?
Well, I think I'm really glad that the processes you are aware running government, it's not like running black like me. I can take decisions, quickly call a board meeting, or even decide because I'm the owner of the business. Here, you operate within the legal framework, but fortunate enough, the council has approved my inner city rejuvenation project, where it has now been allowed to take over the city, turn into a construction site. We're doing an assessment of these buildings. Already 12 of the buildings have now been offered to the private sector. We have the closing date now coming in January, where we're asking the private sector to build affordable accommodation for our people. These buildings belong to the city, but we don't have the balance sheet to build houses ourselves. So we will give them incentives, but what we are saying to them, please tell us how much money you will invest if we give you this building. Please tell us how many rooms you're going to build. Please tell us what type of rentals you're going to charge, because we don't want you to come out with a certain type of rentals. Please tell us how many people you're going to employ during the construction site. Please tell us your training programs, because artisan program is really one of my big
I want to ask about the hijacked buildings, and how many of those were you able to recover, and how many in the city are hijacked buildings?
So far we've identified, I think, about 85, 86, and of the 85, 86, 24 belongs to the City of Johannesburg. Some of them we're looking for their owners. In the event that the owners don't really come forward, because on a daily basis we are encouraging the owners that ran away when the breakdown of law and order in the City of Joburg happened. Business people ran away, left that city because it was free for all. So we're calling on people to come forward. If they don't, us as a city, we are going to expropriate those buildings, offer them to the private sector to build affordable accommodation.
So how many of those then were you able to take back and then make?
Well, as I said, out of the 85, 86, 24 already belong to the city.
And you have,
we have them. So we've already offered 12 for the private sector to give us proposal based on the conditions that I've said to you. But you will see every council meeting I will be offering more buildings to the private sector, because we've got an emergency to provide affordable accommodation for our people. We want to turn the city into a construction site. We want to provide employment opportunities to our people.
Here's the point, though. As you recover these buildings, you've been accused of being heavy-handed, insensitive, and even xenophobic. Those have been accusations about you as mayor of Joburg, that you use heavy-handed methods, and you don't care about what's going to happen to those people who have to be ousted out of those buildings that you are recovering.
Well, I think, Tim, if you look at it, at the people who accuse me are those that were benefiting out of this criminality. the hijackers themselves, who are benefiting with some of the political leadership. So for them, it suits them to really have this chaos because they benefit out of chaos. My intention was very, very clear. I'm sure you're aware, just over a month ago, because I was reported to the Human Rights Commission, and they did a fair assessment, and I signed a contract, an agreement with the Africa Diaspora Forum, where they agreed with me. In fact, I'm in litigation, about to go into a litigation with Home Affairs, because I'm now going to be using the law. I'm going to use the courts to ensure that Home Affairs do what they're supposed to do.
Which is what? What are they
to ensure that everyone who's in the City of Johannesburg is documented. To make sure that everyone who's in the City of Johannesburg must respect the laws. Because I've always been very unapologetic, very clear that the City of Johannesburg was built at the back of migrants, and we want people to come to the
And how much resistance have you faced when you try to maintain law and order in the inner city and other parts of Joburg? I remember when you went with the Metro Police to Rosettenville, for instance, to close one of the drug dens there, and of course, a member of the Metro Police, or a couple of them, were attacked by parishioners at one church that operates out of the city. So how much resistance are you seeing, and how much success are you achieving?
We are achieving massive, honestly, a really very massive success. Because the thing is, you must understand, this process is not an event. It's a process. People have lived under ANC lawlessness for so many years. They're used to it, and they're defended by ANC, because that's why the previous Minister of Home Affairs, who's now the Minister of Finance, remember when I raised this matter, called me xenophobic, called me names, but when I had discussions with him to actually demonstrate to him the problems that our local South Africans are facing, including our legal foreigners. Because these are the two people who are suffering. And I have a responsibility. I have a constitutional responsibility to protect law-abiding citizens, both South Africans and foreigners. But one thing, unapologetically, the City of Johannesburg is not going to be the city that harbors criminals. So, and this matter is not negotiable. So if it means us and Home Affairs will have to really go into the courts, fortunate enough, there's just no way that the courts are not going to agree with us. But fortunate enough, we're in the process right now. We're putting each other on terms in terms of dealing with this matter. In fact, I just sent them a letter yesterday regarding how we're going to be working together. I would really expect them by end of January 2018, we must sign up real agreements. In my letter, I need the terms of reference, because they're giving me the commitment now. To avoid going to court, they are saying they are willing to work with us. And obviously, in terms of our intergovernmental relationship, we want to work with them. Mm-hmm. But one thing for sure, they must understand this is not a game where we're just going around to fool our people.
Sure.
So I need full commitment from them. Otherwise, I'm going to be forced to use the courts to force them to do what they are constitutionally obliged to do.
The Mayor of Joburg, Mr. Herman Mashaba, is with us here on the program, and in a moment we will be talking to him about one of the big fights on his hands, and he's been talking about corruption. We'll find out about that, as well as the inner city rejuvenation and the improvement of services in the outlying townships of Joburg. Tonight, I'm with the Mayor of Joburg, Mr. Herman Mashaba, and we're talking about his just slightly more than 1 year in office and the challenges that he's been dealing with, as well as the successes he's achieving and the controversies that he's had to deal with. And one other point I want to raise with you, Mayor, it's on the back of the earlier conversation, right, that you are providing housing in the inner city, recovering buildings, you're trying to maintain law and order. What about the rejuvenation of the city in the sense of job creation? Are businesses moving back into the inner city?
Well, Tim, there's just no way that businesses can really move into the inner city with these hijacked buildings and total lawlessness. But fortunate enough, I have managed to engaged, because I engage on a regular basis. I have a team from my office and other departments engaged in the private sector, genuine business people on a daily basis to ensure that they don't move out of the inner city. I've managed a few weeks ago, I had a very successful meeting with APSA to request them to please don't move out of the inner city. Managed to engage the FNB to say, please stay out of here. I shared with them my plan in terms of working with private developers, small ones, big ones, to ensure that we turn the inner city into the city that our people can live, work, and play. And I believe we are going to succeed. The appetite is great. I think my engagement with them, it's great. But let's first make sure that I think we start demonstrating the 12 buildings that we've already put in the market. Obviously, some of the buildings are obviously privately owned. We are working with them. Our development planning is working around the clock to make sure that we can fast track our approvals in terms of the housing plans approvals and rezoning for us to provide the necessary infrastructure. So you will see this city within the next 18, 24 months. It'll be a real construction site. But now what happens to the team while we're busy building this affordable accommodation and small businesses? It's immediate massive employment of our people. But we have to get, unfortunately, we've got to get rid of undocumented people who do not qualify to be in our city. That is this matter. For me, it's crucial, because for as long as I'm going to allow lawlessness to prevail, I'm going to fail. And I cannot engage in something where I can see in advance. This country belongs to our people, and I believe I owe it to them. Those people living in backyard rooms in Soweto and informal settlements are people who are law-abiding citizens. I believe as government I have the responsibility.
But here's the point. That
to ensure that I provide accommodation to them. They can afford to pay. They are not asking for us as government to build them houses. But we are saying is as government, create an opportunity for them to get accommodation.
Right. The ANC in Joburg has tried to move in the city legislature that you be removed as mayor. And repeatedly what he said about you is that you are confrontational, you don't cooperate with them, and that instead of providing services, you're spending too much time fighting corruption, and therefore you're rendering the city incapable of providing services.
well, I think, I laugh, but actually it's quite sad, Tim. The issues that ANC raises as issues to call for my removal as the mayor, that my focus is on corruption. As I'm talking to you right now, I presented 2 weeks ago in council 16.2 billion rands worth of ANC corruption that I've uncovered. Tip of an iceberg. Already, as I'm talking to you right now, that figure is over 17 billion. Because on a daily basis, I don't understand how ANC can expect me to hide this from society. You know what you can do with 17 billion. And
is it that amount of money, it's
more than 7. Right now, as I'm talking to you, it's over 17 billion. I've got a report. It's public document, because what I did, because every time they are saying, no, the mayor keeps talking about corruption, but where's this corruption? Then they forget that we're not stupid to that level. We then came out with a motion in council to get me as a mayor on a quarterly basis. I must report on corruption. And fortunately enough, council approved this. Obviously, ANC rejected this motion, but all the other parties approved this. And last month, Tim, this report is a public document. Anyone can see.
Where did you see the level of corruption? I'm not disputing that, because you are the one who's done the investigations and uncovered it, right? It's just that the amount is too big to imagine.
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, in fact, I don't know if you saw 2 days ago, I released a press statement on one corruption case. At the time, in the report of the 16.2 billion,
yes,
I calculated this at 1.3 billion. And I received a preliminary report on this investigation on a company called MTC. The city, just over 2 years ago, decided to pay 1.3 billion rands to buy the fiber network for the city from the private sector.
Yeah.
And I discovered when I took over, this thing did not make sense. Losing money, no business plan, unable to even construct a business plan. And ask the officials, but why did we buy this thing? I'm now sitting with the 1.3 billion rands dead. What happened? I then obviously instituted a forensic investigation. At the time, I said it was 1.3 billion. Right now, 2 days ago, you can check on press releases, 1.7 billion. And counting, and I can assure you, if I look at the gaps of some of the monies and consultants which were paid to construct this transaction, I can tell you it's another 400 or 500 million rands is going to come out of this. Just one transaction. You know, another one that is actually a sad state of affairs. You remember beginning sometime a few months ago,
yeah.
I reported about the construction of, supposedly construction of a substation in El Dorado Park.
Yeah.
When I was doing the budget beginning of this year, I see the transactions, 28 different transactions to the value of 68 million rands. Substation is being built. Okay, then I wanted to see how far. I sent a team to go and see how far we are with this substation to see how much money we still need. When they sent the team out there, no substation built. We started paying for this substation June of 2015. The last payment made end of November last year. 28 different payments, like you know, as if there's construction happening. So these are just really a tip of an. If I give you more and more of these cases, I'm sure you saw last week with Pick It Up, buying of some waste crushers.
Yeah.
Waste crushers, we bought the wrong ones, paid 10 million rands more, and buy them, pay. And when the whistleblower came to me, said to me it's the 35 million rands contract, and I obviously requested the documents. Yes, 35 million. Fortunately enough, another whistleblower came 2 days later to our forensic group. Forensic, he says, no, guys, a few months before the elections, a forensic investigation was done and given to this to the previous administration, did nothing. To discover this amount is not actually 35 million rands, it's over 60 million rands, because you buy raw machines, you pay 15 million rands for service contract of machines that you're not using. Pay 15 million in advance. So, I mean, I can give you.
Well,
please go
the amounts are mind-boggling.
Please go through that
yes.
report when you get, because it's a public document,
sure.
And every quarter I am going to be reporting on these matters. You look at how many people we've arrested, how many people lost their jobs. And
let me interrupt you there, Mayor, for a second. I mean, these are the things that you've uncovered and you are experiencing, and I can see you're very, very agitated and angry about this. But going forward,
why I'm angry, Tim, going to our communities, go and look at the living conditions of our people.
Yes, and I want to ask you a question about that going forward in the new year, because it's just a week or two away. What can the residents of Joburg, particularly those communities that you refer to that live in squalid conditions, what can they expect from the city and your government?
Well, I think, Tim, our budget, it's out there. I'm sure you're aware as well. I had 2 months ago, I had a press conference to take the residents of the city of Johannesburg in total confidence so that they understand the kind of mess that I've inherited. 170 billion rands of infrastructure backlog. Just last night, I was talking to MMC Makuba of the transport in Soweto with this massive rains. When the new South Africa was born, we went into Soweto to build tar roads everywhere. I don't know whether they forgot or it was not they had no knowledge. You build tar roads without stormwater drainage. Now, for the last week, our transport department, we're sitting with a crisis because with these heavy rains, our houses, poor people's houses are flooded. Now I need money to really go and build that infrastructure. Our bridges, our roads, You know, it's a major issue, this informal settlements. But I only got just under 10 billion rands a year. 170 billion rands, I've only got under 10 billion rands, and which in the past was stolen. I'm also still sitting with some of incompetent senior people in our government who are working with outside forces to sabotage us. So these are things that we are dealing with. But I'm personally quite hopeful of determination, because fortunate enough, a big number of our civil servants are committed civil servants. Yeah. They just needed the leadership. And we are providing them with that leadership so that we can go and improve the lives of our people.
Well, as we conclude, Mayor, give us your Christmas message to the residents of Joburg. We are a few days away from Christmas, and they would like to know what the first resident of Joburg feels and thinks like as we look ahead to the Christmas and the New Year.
First of all, I would really say to the people of Johannesburg, the entire people of Johannesburg, thank you very much for giving me this honor and the privilege to serve you. I'm your servant. I'm a real public servant. You are my bosses. 2018 is not going to be an easy year. Let us not fool ourselves. We are not going to be, as a country, be able to resolve these matters overnight. But let us not look for shortcuts. What in my township lingo we call double up. Please let us stop this mentality of shortcut mentality. And I understand people don't have to really be patient, but there's nothing that one can do to turn this ship around overnight. Allow us to kickstart the economic recovery of the city of Johannesburg. Allow and work with us to turn this city into a construction site, because through the employment in the construction industry, we'll be in a position to employ thousands and thousands of our people. Allow us to ensure that all the foreign nationals with no documentations who are taking the jobs of our people, please work with us. We want foreign nationals in this country, but we want those that can add value to our country. And those that are running away from dictators, work with us to ensure that Home Affairs gives them papers. Yeah. But the criminal elements, let's get them out of our communities, but let us do and work within the legal framework. If we do that, 5-10 years down the line, all of us will be happy with the city of Johannesburg, because the city of Johannesburg will be the city where people can work, live and play.
Herman Mashaba, the mayor of Joburg, thank you very much for having been our guest. And of course, you will be back on the show in a few months' time or a few weeks' time, because we will always have to come back to you and update some of the things that we spoke about here tonight. Much appreciated. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And everything of the best in 2018. It's going to be a difficult year.
Absolutely.
And you believe you'll beat the motions, I suppose, in council next time.
Something that I don't have control over, but I'm a committed public servant.
That's the mayor of Joburg, Herman Mashaba, who's been our guest on the show. And from us, good night to you.